We had the orange sesame kale slaw. I call it 4 ingredients because I'm assuming you're already going to have the orange sesame dressing made that Joel taught you how to make, I think, in one of his demonstrations. Wasn't he going to do that? He told me he was. But anyway, if you have the dressing on hand, and guess what? You could change the dressing. How about using the Bing cherry dressing instead and putting fresh Bing cherries on, since Bing cherries are in season right now? Get rid of the orange segments, sub out Bing cherries, use the Bing cherry dressing. Same thing, avocados would be lovely. Avocados are just in there to kind of add a little richness and creaminess to the dish. So you don't have to have whatever dressing you have, try to figure out something to do with it. We had the smashed raspberry dressing last night. That would work well with this too, and some raspberries. Some of you tell me you don't like fruit on your salad. I tell you need to get over it, because fruit on salad is a wonderful thing. It makes salad taste more like dessert. Well, who wouldn't want that? Let's go to the next one. Persimmon pudding. This was a recipe that I developed in the Eat to Live cookbook, the first one, not the quick and easy. How many of you are familiar with hachia persimmons? Oh, if you've never had a persimmon, and especially a hachia, you're missing out on life. They're kind of heart-shaped orange things that you sit on your counter until they get almost like mushy. Yeah. They're delicious. They're super sweet. And I mean, if you want sugar, man, if you're a sugar person, this is the most natural way you can get great sugar without problems. But all you really need is some sort of acid in there, and put them in your blender. There's enough. You don't need the arrowroot. You don't really need the water. There's enough pectin and persimmons that it blends up and it turns into kind of like a custardy texture, and it solidifies when it sits. So what could we add to this as an acid to just brighten the flavor of the persimmon a little bit? Lemon would work. Orange juice would work. Do you remember the list of the citruses from the other day? Lime might be okay. Lime isn't the best choice. Well, the blood orange vinegar, obviously it's on the recipe there. There was something else on that list, and Martin talked about the Texas variety or something. Kumquats. Kumquats really are this big. I wanted to explain to you that he was joking, that those of you that don't know what a kumquat really is, they're little tiny oranges. But they're kind of sweet, tart, and then the rind is sweet, and the inside is kind of sour, and that gives the acid you need. Kumquats and persimmons together are amazing. So you throw in 4 hachias in your blender and maybe 2 or 3 kumquats, blend it up, and you've got your persimmon pudding. And then maybe serve it with a dollop of the vanilla sabayon on top. You've got a very, very elegant dessert with only few ingredients. Here's another recipe I was inspired by from Charlie Trotter's Vegetables, this a rutabaga gnocchi dish. I love rutabaga, and I only came to love it in my adulthood because my mother used to cook the hell out of it, and it would be just mushy and gross. But I love it. I love the flavor. And so let's pick out what are the main things. If we had to make a 4-ingredient dish out of this beautiful picture, what 4 things would we pick out? Rutabaga, obviously. Mushroom. Sunflower. Let's generalize and say sunflower. And mustard. I think those are the 4 things, because we've got sunflower sprouts and we've got sunflower seeds. So we've got 2 incarnations of sunflower seeds. So let's do sunflower, mustard, rutabaga, mushrooms. Delicious. We don't need to make the gnocchi. Gnocchi is like, oh my God, that's another day-long project. I have made them and they're delicious, but you don't need to. You dice the rutabaga like I did the sweet potato. You saute it with the mushrooms. You could add some onion to make it more healthful, and some greens if you wanted to, but sprinkle the finished dish with some lightly toasted sunflower seeds. How would we make a mustard oil? We can't use the oil, so how would we make a mustard oil?
So actually use a mustard?
I would just take the mustard and thin it down with water. Take like some Dijon, whisk in a little water, and drizzle it over the plate. Or you could even use the yellow mustard, French's yellow mustard, thinned out with a little water, and use that as your drizzle. You don't need a lot, just to give it a little bit of acid. It would be a delicious dish. Here's another one. This is so beautiful. This is a roasted beet, asparagus, and goat cheese terrine. Do you all know what a terrine is? Well, this is just a slice from the terrine. This is what a terrine looks like. It's usually made in like a loaf shape, and it's multiple layers of things, and it's sliced. So you get the slice. So here he's made this beautiful, this is Charlie Trotter again, beautiful beet and asparagus terrine with the goat cheese holding it all together in a loaf, and then you get a slice, and there's a little drizzles, you know how the fancy food is. There's drizzles and dabs of all sorts of things. But let's look at what would we pick out from here that would be 4 things that would make a great dish. Definitely the beets, dill, asparagus, balsamic. I'd say, yeah, maybe we want to go with 5 with this one. You don't have to do anything with the balsamic other than buy it. So we'll call it goat cheese. All right, so we got cheese, asparagus, beets, dill, balsamic. 5 ingredients. I cheated a little bit. So what could we make out of that? This was what I was inspired by, that terrine, to make these. How can you make something simpler, Nutritarian? So the crostini last night we had. All right, what about if you see a recipe like that and you're like, oh my God, I could never make that terrine. And you look at that list of ingredients and you're like, well, it's not too complicated. Why not just toss it all together and make a salad? You can, and I wanted to talk a little bit about salads and composed salads versus everything but the kitchen sink salads. This was actually a picture of a roasted beet, asparagus, dill, and I use a 12-year-old balsamic. Or you could just reduce a cheap balsamic. Do you all know that trick? You buy like the $3 chuck balsamic and you reduce it down and it becomes a really much nicer vinegar. Actually, we had some as the accompaniment to the shiitake. Yeah, it sweetens it up and smooths it out, so it's not quite so acidy. So you can do that too. You don't have to buy 12-year-old or further because it starts getting expensive once you get to the 25, 50, and 100-year-old balsamics. And in this picture, I made some beet gnocchi. So this was an old photo. So we've got the dill, we've got the beets, the asparagus. Just toss it with some greens and balsamic, and you've got a delicious salad. Now let me talk about composed salads. And what I mean by composed salads are purposeful salads. I see all of you out at the salad bar, and you go in and take your greens and your beans and your tomatoes and your clementine segments and your carrots, and you've got everything on there, and then and you're at the dressings, you're like, oh, which should I put on there? I want you to look at the dressings first. We should probably put them in reverse order and go through the line and say, all right, there's a Caesar dressing. What would go well with a Caesar dressing that's here on the salad bar? Instead of putting everything on there, you've got plenty of meals left in your lifetime. And I know you want to get your G-bombs in, but every salad doesn't need to be a kitchen sink of ingredients with no rhyme or reason for each other. And then you put a blueberry dressing on like artichokes. I'm like, no. It's just not a match. So think about things that actually go together. And that's why the Deborah Madison book is really helpful. And that's why the Alice Waters book is really helpful, because they tell you about which vegetables go with each other and which herbs are, so you'll eventually get to a point where you'll be like, oh, that would go really well. Let's say we had the Asian ginger dressing at the beginning of the line. You said, okay, I'm going to do an Asian salad. And you went down the line and you saw broccoli florets. Would that be good with an Asian salad? Sure, put those on. What about mushrooms? Sure. What about onions? Sure. What about kiwi? Probably not. What about names. What about kidney beans? Probably not. What about edamame?
Yes.
Sure. What about radishes? Yes. Beets? Not so much. No. I'm trying to think of what else. But you get my idea. Think of what you've had in an Asian restaurant before in a stir fry or in a Asian themed salad. Yeah, cabbage would be a great ingredient also. Anything that's kind of Asian inspired would go with that dressing. But there are things that just don't go with that dressing, and I see you all just lumping it all on there. So be a little more thoughtful about what you're eating together, okay?